No one survived feeding the caged alien giant, but he did. Now she will never let him go. The United States Penitentiary at Redstone, New Mexico, was not a place for ordinary prisoners. The walls were 30 feet high, capped with coiled razor wire, and the watchtowers were manned with men who had seen war. But what lay beneath the prison was far stranger than any cartel lord, murderer, or terrorist could imagine. Deep underground, past reinforced blast doors and concrete corridors that smelled of bleach and steel, there was a chamber. It was larger than a football field, though the ceiling sagged with dampness, and the fluorescent lights buzzed weakly. In the middle of that chamber stood a cage the size of a warehouse. Bars thicker than a man's torso held something that should not have existed on Earth. Her, the alien, was enormous, easily 3 times the height of a man, towering like a nightmare out of some forgotten myth. Her skin shimmered in hues of deep cobalt, catching the light like polished stone. Her hair, long, heavy strands of dark sapphire, fell around her shoulders in tangled waves, brushing the iron floor when she knelt. Her eyes glowed faintly, pale silver, like a storm held in place. Every guard called her a monster. Every scientist called her a specimen. The men in suits called her a weapon. But to Daniel Carter, an inmate of Redstone, serving a life sentence for armed robbery gone wrong, she was something else. He first saw her the day they sent him down to the lower levels as part of a punishment detail. His wrists were shackled, his ankles chained, and 2 guards shoved him forward until he stumbled into the chamber. The air down there was freezing, heavy with disinfectant, and yet it carried something else too, an electric pulse, as if the space itself trembled in her presence. The guards barked orders. Drop the bucket by the bars. Don't look her in the eye. Don't speak. Don't touch. The bucket was filled with something foul, nutrient paste, meat scraps, God knows what. Supposedly it kept the creature alive, though rumors spread like wildfire through the prison. Anyone who tried to feed her ended up dead. They said she tore men apart through the bars, that her hands could snap steel like twigs, that she could crush a human chest with her stare alone. Daniel had laughed it off at first. He had spent half his life around killers and liars. Ghost stories didn't scare him. But when he lifted the bucket and shuffled forward, the laughter drained out of him. She moved. The giantess rose from her crouched position with a slow, deliberate grace. Her head tilted, her long hair sliding like liquid down her shoulders. The silver of her eyes locked onto him, unblinking, sharp. The air seemed to thicken as her massive hands curled around the bars. He could hear the metal groan under her grip. Daniel froze. His pulse hammered so hard it hurt. He knew the rules. Drop the food, back away. Don't engage. Don't breathe too close. But she didn't lunge. She didn't roar. She didn't crush the bucket or tear him apart. She watched, like she was studying him. For one unbearable moment, it felt like he was naked under that gaze. Not just his body, his thoughts, his regrets, the things he never said out loud. A guard cursed from behind. Carter, what the hell are you waiting for? Put it down. Daniel set the bucket on the concrete, but his eyes never left hers. Something in his chest twisted, sharp and strange. She wasn't just some beast. She wasn't mindless. She was lonely. He saw it in the way her shoulders sagged, in the way her breath caught when the food was pushed toward her. She waited until the guards barked again before she extended one massive hand through the bars, her fingers brushing the bucket with surprising delicacy. Her nails were sharp, claw-like, but she moved with the caution of someone who had broken too many fragile things before. Daniel stepped back, heart pounding. The giantess lifted the bucket, sniffed at it, and then glanced back at him. And there, just for an instant, her lips curved. Not a smile, more like recognition. The guards shoved him out. The chains rattled against the floor as he stumbled, and they slammed the heavy doors shut behind him. But Daniel couldn't forget her eyes. That silver glow haunted him in the dark of his cell, in the noise of the cafeteria, in the silence of the yard. He'd never been looked at like that. Not by his mother, not by a lover, not by anyone. Days turned into weeks. They kept sending him down. Always the same orders. Always the same warnings. Other inmates refused to go, but Daniel was stubborn. Maybe reckless. Maybe suicidal. And every time, she was there, waiting. He started noticing things the guards didn't. The way she crouched low to make herself smaller when humans were near. The way her fingers trembled before she touched the food, as though she feared it might vanish. The way her silver eyes always sought his face, never the others. She wasn't a monster. She was a prisoner. And whether he liked it or not, Daniel Carter, the man who had ruined his own life, had become the only thing keeping her from breaking. The rules of Redstone were simple: obey, survive, stay quiet. But rules had never been Daniel Carter's strong point. By the third week of feeding duty, the guards started whispering. He noticed the way they stared at him when he came back from the lower levels. Sometimes one of them muttered, "Lucky bastard, why hasn't she killed him yet?" The answer was simple, though Daniel didn't dare say it out loud. She didn't want to. The alien giantess, whatever her true name was, had begun waiting for him. She would kneel in the shadows of her cage until the guards shoved him forward with the bucket. Then, as the steel echoed under his boots, she would move closer, her massive hands wrapping around the bars, her silver eyes locked on him. No matter how many times this happened, Daniel's throat tightened every damn time. She was terrifying, colossal, powerful, a living weapon, but she was also beautiful in a way that unsettled him. Her movements were precise, deliberate, almost human, and she was trying. One evening, after the guards retreated further back than usual, she did something forbidden. She spoke, not in English, not in any language Daniel recognized. It was a low, resonant sound, almost like a song buried under layers of static. The cage walls vibrated with it, and the bucket nearly rattled off the floor. Daniel froze. His instincts screamed to back away, but he didn't. Her glowing eyes narrowed, and she repeated the sound, softer this time. Then she tapped the bars with one claw and looked at him expectantly. "Yeah," he whispered before he could stop himself. I don't understand you." The words bounced around the chamber like they were trespassing. The alien tilted her head. Her hair slid across her shoulder like waves of night. She tapped the bar again, then pressed her hand against her chest. The sound came once more, slightly different, drawn out, deliberate. Her name. Daniel's lips parted, but no sound came. He wanted to repeat it, to honor it, but his mouth couldn't shape the syllables. It felt like trying to swallow fire. She waited. Then, carefully, she tapped the bar again and pointed at him. His stomach clenched. "Daniel," he whispered, before fear caught up to him. The alien's eyes gleamed. Slowly, impossibly, she echoed back, "Donald." The sound was guttural, broken, but it was his. The guards hadn't noticed. Not yet. They were laughing about something in the corridor, their voices muffled. But if they had been paying attention, Daniel knew they would have dragged him out and beaten him half to death for breaking protocol. And maybe he would have deserved it. Because that single exchange, the sharing of names, changed everything. The next morning, things shifted. Warden Harker, a cold man with a face carved from stone, summoned Daniel to his office. The walls were plastered with old military commendations and photos of him in desert fatigues. His eyes were the same color as the desert sky, pale, merciless. "You've been down there longer than anyone," Harker said flatly, as if accusing him of a crime. "And yet you keep coming back alive. Why?" Daniel shrugged. He knew better than to speak his mind. "Guess I'm lucky." Harker's gaze was sharp. "Luck runs out. That thing isn't a pet. It isn't a woman. It's a hostile entity that killed 20 men before we locked it up. Don't forget that." Daniel bit the inside of his cheek. He wanted to say, "She's not a thing." He wanted to scream that they were wrong. But he just nodded. "Yes, sir." Harker leaned back, drumming his fingers against the desk. "Good. Because if I get even a hint that you're trying to communicate with it, you'll find yourself in the hole for the rest of your miserable life." "Understood. Understood." The warden dismissed him, but the warning burned in Daniel's chest. That night, the guards brought him back to the chamber. The alien was waiting again, her silver eyes brighter than before. When she saw him, she leaned forward eagerly, her hand brushing the bars. No," she rumbled, almost a purr. He glanced at the guards. One of them was yawning, the other distracted by his phone. "Not now," Daniel whispered harshly. "They're watching." Her brow furrowed. She didn't understand. She pressed her fingers tighter against the steel, and he could see the faint tremble in her hand, not from weakness, but from desperation. And then, like fate had a cruel sense of timing, the other shoe dropped. The younger guard, Ramirez looked up just in time to hear the alien's voice. His jaw fell open, and his hand shot to his radio. "Warden, she's talking." The thing is, in a blur of panic, Daniel stepped forward, his chains clattering, and slammed his shoulder into the bars. "Shut the hell up, Ramirez. You didn't hear anything." The guard froze, stunned. The alien's eyes widened, flashing with something fierce, protectiveness, maybe even gratitude. But the damage was done. Ramirez's radio crackled, and alarms began to howl through Redstone. For the first time since Daniel met her, the giantess roared. The sound shook the chamber, rattled his bones, and made the guards stumble backward in terror. Sparks rained from the ceiling lights as her hands gripped the bars, bending them an inch outward before slamming them back into place. Daniel staggered back, heart in his throat. It wasn't just about feeding her anymore. It wasn't about rules or cages or rumors. Now everyone knew she could speak, and Daniel Carter had just risked everything to protect her secret. The alarms didn't stop. Redstone's underground echoed with a shrill mechanical wail, red warning lights painting the walls in pulses of blood. Guards flooded the chamber with rifles raised, boots hammering the steel floor. The alien giantess crouched low, her glowing silver eyes darting, her long blue hair falling across her face. Her hands gripped the bars, the metal groaning under her strength. One wrong move, and she could rip them apart, but Daniel knew she wouldn't. Not unless they pushed her too far. Warden Harker stormed in, his trench coat flaring behind him. His eyes burned with fury as he pointed at Daniel. "Restrain him. Now." Two guards grabbed Daniel by the chains and yanked him backward. His knees slammed the ground, but he didn't care. He only saw her, how her chest heaved with panicked breaths, how she pressed herself closer to the bars, watching him with something raw and desperate. She spoke. Ramirez blurted out, face pale, hands shaking. "I swear I heard it." She said his name. The chamber erupted into shouts. Some guards cursed in disbelief. Others muttered prayers under their breath. The scientists at the edge of the room scribbled notes feverishly, their faces pale with excitement. Harker raised a hand, silencing them all. His gaze fell back on Daniel. "You, what did it say to you?" Daniel's mouth went dry. He could feel her eyes on him, waiting, pleading. If he betrayed her now, she'd be nothing more than a lab experiment to be dissected. But if he lied, he swallowed hard. Nothing, just noise. "She said your name." Ramirez protested. Daniel glared at him. "You're hearing things." For a long, tense moment, the chamber held its breath. Then, to Daniel's shock, the alien giantess did something reckless. She spoke again. "Donald." Clearer this time. Louder. The sound vibrated through every wall, shook every guard to their core. Gasps erupted. Ramirez pointed, vindicated, shouting, "There. You heard it. You all heard it." Harker's expression darkened like a thundercloud. Slowly, he turned his cold eyes on Daniel. "You've been teaching it. You've been talking to it." Daniel's heart pounded. "No." The alien's roar cut him off, a sound of rage and fear so powerful the fluorescent lights shattered, showering sparks over the chamber. The guards scrambled, aiming rifles at her, shouting over one another. "Hold your fire." Harker barked, but his hand hovered near his pistol. Daniel fought against the guards restraining him. "Don't shoot her. She's dangerous," one soldier shouted back. "She's not." Daniel's voice cracked with desperation. The giantess pressed her face to the bars, silver eyes locked on his. Her voice rumbled low, trembling, but the word was clear. "Donald." It was no longer just a name. It was a plea. That night, Daniel didn't return to his cell. They threw him into solitary confinement, a concrete box with no windows and no bed, just a metal bench bolted to the wall. The silence pressed against him harder than the bars ever had. He paced, back and forth, until his throat ached from whispering her name to himself. He had no plan, no allies, no way out. But he knew one thing for certain. If they realized how intelligent she truly was, they would break her, tear her apart piece by piece. And it would be his fault. Hours, maybe days. Later, the slot in the door screeched open. A tray of food slid inside. Daniel ignored it. He didn't care. But a voice low, hushed, followed it. "You're in deep, Carter." Daniel froze. He crouched by the slot and whispered back, "Who's there?" A pause. Then, "McBride. Guard." Daniel knew the name. An older officer, quiet, kept to himself. "What do you want?" McBride's voice lowered even further. "I've seen the way she looks at you. She's not like they say, is she?" Daniel's pulse spiked. "Why are you asking me this?" "Because," McBride said, his voice gravelly with fear. "Harker called in the military. Black vans pulled in the yard this morning. They're not here to keep her alive. They're here to harvest her." Daniel's stomach dropped. His chains rattled as he surged to his feet. "When?" "Soon," McBride muttered. "If you want to do something, you'd better do it fast." The slot slammed shut. Footsteps faded. Daniel stood there in the dark, shaking. He should have been terrified for himself. He'd already signed his own death warrant by protecting her. But all he could think about was her silver eyes, the way she said his name like he mattered, like he wasn't just another prisoner rotting away. And for the first time in his wasted, broken life, Daniel Carter realized he had something worth fighting for. Back in the underground chamber, the alien giantess crouched alone, her long blue hair hiding her face. She had never spoken more than a few stolen syllables in her captivity. But now, over and over, in the silence, she whispered one word into the darkness. "Dunno." The military vans arrived at Redstone under the cover of night. Black painted, unmarked, with tinted windows. Soldiers in matte armor poured out, rifles strapped tight, helmets hiding their eyes. They didn't belong to the Bureau of Prisons. They didn't even belong to the army Daniel once knew from TV news. These men weren't here to guard. They were here to extract. From his solitary cell, Daniel heard the faint hum of elevators descending into the depths. The air in the prison changed, the kind of silence that only came before blood spilled. In the underground chamber, the alien giantess sensed it too. She crouched low, her blue skin glowing faintly under the dim fluorescence. Her silver eyes darted toward the doors before they even opened. When the soldiers marched in, their steps were synchronized, mechanical. They carried equipment, restraints, syringes, saws. She roared, a sound that cracked the ceiling and sent dust raining down. The men flinched, but their commander barked, "Hold formation." Daniel wasn't supposed to be anywhere near this. But fate, or maybe her, had other plans. McBride unlocked his solitary door in silence, eyes full of fear. He pressed a finger to his lips and shoved a key into Daniel's hand. "Don't make me regret this," McBride whispered. Then he walked away as if nothing happened. Daniel's hand shook as he fit the key into his chains. The lock clicked. The shackles fell away. He barely breathed. One choice. That's all it was. If he stayed put, he'd live out his life in a concrete box. If he went down there, he tightened his fists. He was going. The elevator ride felt endless. The hum of the machinery rattled through his bones, each second ticking louder than the last. His heart pounded, sweat slicking his back. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't a hero. He was a man who'd failed at almost everything. But when those doors slid open, and he heard her roar echo again, he knew why he was there. He ran. The chamber was chaos. Floodlights glared white against the steel bars of her cage. Soldiers shouted orders, their boots hammering the ground. Sparks flew as they welded massive restraints to the bars, preparing to immobilize her. And she fought like the storm she was. Her enormous hands smashed against the cage, bending steel. Her long blue hair whipped around her face as she roared again, silver eyes wild with panic. And then she saw him. Daniel sprinted into the chamber, chains still dangling from his wrists. Guard shouted. Rifles snapped up, but he didn't stop. He slammed into Ramirez, knocking the younger guard to the ground, grabbed his baton, and swung it wildly at anyone who came near. "Stop him," the commander barked. But it was too late. Daniel had reached the cage. Her massive hand shot forward, fingers wrapping around the bars nearest him. Sparks erupted where her claws scraped the steel. She leaned close, her silver eyes locked on him, with a ferocity that made his knees buckle. "Don't," she whispered, voice trembling, breaking. He pressed his shackled hands against the bars. "I'm here." Behind him, boots thundered. A soldier aimed his rifle square at Daniel's back. The alien's roar ripped through the chamber, pure, primal fury. In one impossible motion, She bent the bars outward with her bare hands. The steel screamed, snapping like brittle bones. Gasps erupted. The commander shouted, "Open fire!" Gunfire exploded, deafening, sparks ricocheting off the bars. Daniel dove through the gap she had torn, rolling across the cold steel floor, inside her cage. Bullets screamed past, clanging off metal. The alien lowered her hand. Trembling, careful, she curled her enormous fingers around him, shielding him with her palm, her blue skin warm and unyielding. For the first time, Daniel was inside her prison. For the first time, he belonged there. The soldiers regrouped, shouting over the chaos. They prepared heavier weapons, grenade launchers, tranquilizer cannons. But Daniel didn't hear them. He only felt her heartbeat, thunderous, steady, rattling through her hand into his bones. She crouched over him like a fortress, hair falling around them both like a sapphire curtain. He looked up in her eyes. "I won't let them take you." Her lips trembled. And then, slow, broken, but unmistakable, she spoke again. "Mine." The word reverberated through him like a vow. And for the first time in his life, Daniel Carter realized he wasn't protecting her. She was protecting him. Outside the cage, chaos reigned. Alarms howled. The soldiers prepared their final assault. Warden Harker shouted orders no one could hear over the storm of gunfire and roars. And in that moment, Daniel knew there was no going back. Whatever happened next, he had crossed the line. He was no longer an inmate. She was no longer a prisoner. Together, they were something else. If you've ever rooted for an impossible love, for a bond that defies every wall and every rule, don't stop here. Subscribe for more stories like this, because their fight is only beginning. Smoke choked the underground chamber. The air was thick with the stench of gunpowder, burnt metal, and blood. The soldiers had pulled back, regrouping near the heavy blast doors. Sparks crackled from shattered floodlights, plunging parts of the room into shadows. Alarms screamed overhead, red warning lights flickering like a heartbeat gone mad. Inside the torn cage, Daniel huddled beneath her massive hand, his ears ringing from the gunfire. His chest heaved, his throat raw from shouting. She, his giantess, crouched over him, her body a living shield. Her long blue hair draped down like a veil, strands shimmering as emergency strobes lit her face. Her silver eyes blazed, not with fear, but with fury. "Mine," she whispered again, as though the word itself might ward off the hail of bullets. Daniel clenched his fists. "If we stay here, they'll kill us both." She tilted her head, listening, not to him, but to the pounding boots, the clicking rifles being reloaded, the distant hum of something worse coming down the elevator shaft. Her claws flexed against the steel floor, gouging deep scars into it. She understood, and she refused. With a roar that cracked the air, she tore the cage wider. Steel shrieked, sparks erupted, and suddenly there was no prison, no bars. Only her, and the men who wanted her dead. Fire. Grenade launchers thumped. Tranquilizer rounds hissed through the air. Daniel had seconds to react. He grabbed the fallen body of a soldier, Ramirez, bleeding but alive, and rolled them both behind the twisted bars just as darts slammed into the floor where he'd been standing. The giantess raised her arm, blocking the rest. Her skin smoked where the chemicals burned against it, but she snarled, ripping the darts free with her claws. "Stop! Stop shooting!" Ramirez wheezed, clutching his side. Blood spilled between his fingers. He stared at her, at Daniel, and for the first time, his fear was matched with awe. But the soldiers didn't stop. Orders screamed through radios. More men poured in. The warden stepped forward, face pale, but voice sharp. "You think you saved her, Carter? You signed her death warrant. And your own." Daniel spat blood from his split lip. "At least I didn't chain her like an animal." Harker's jaw tightened. "You don't understand what she is." Daniel glared up at him from beneath her hand. "I don't have to. She's not yours. She's not a weapon. She's herself." The giantess's eyes flickered down at him, softening for just a moment, before hardening again with resolve. The soldiers advanced. The sound of boots against steel echoed like thunder. She had a choice: fight or fall. Her claws clenched. Her chest expanded with a deep, rattling breath. And then, with a sound that shook the bones of every man present, she slammed her fists into the ground. The floor cracked. Bolts popped loose. The chamber trembled. The soldiers faltered, eyes wide. She roared again, a sound of defiance that rattled teeth and made the floodlights explode in showers of sparks. For the first time, the men hesitated. But Daniel knew hesitation wouldn't last. More troops would come. He could already hear the rumble of heavy machinery above. The military wasn't going to risk losing their asset. She couldn't win this fight. Not alone. And Daniel couldn't let her fall. He dragged Ramirez into the shadows of the cage, ignoring his protests. The young guard's breath rattled. You're insane, Carter. She'll kill you. Daniel met his eyes. She's had 100 chances. She didn't. That's more than I can say for any of you. Ramirez's face twisted with pain, and maybe with doubt. For the first time, he didn't answer. The giantess turned back to Daniel. Her silver eyes locked onto his, searching, questioning. He nodded, even though his whole body trembled. If we're doing this, we do it together. Her lips parted. For a moment, it seemed she might say more, something beyond his name, beyond mine. But instead, she extended her hand, massive claws curling upward, palm open. An invitation. Daniel didn't hesitate. He climbed on her hand, the warmth of her skin searing against his. Her fingers curled carefully around him, enclosing him in her grip without crushing him. He felt her strength in every trembling muscle, every quake of her body as tranquilizers burned in her blood. She rose to her full, terrifying height. The cage behind her collapsed, twisted metal falling in heaps. The soldiers raised their rifles again. But now, there was no prisoner. There was no specimen. There was no monster. There was only her, and the man she refused to let go. Warden Harker's voice cracked through the chaos. Bring her down. Don't let them escape. Escape. The word lit a fire in Daniel's chest. For the first time since the botch robbery that ruined his life, he wanted something more than survival. He wanted freedom. Not for him. For her. Even if it killed him. The alien giantess turned toward the far wall, the thick concrete where the underground met the outer world. Her claws dug into it, chunks of cement crumbling under her strength. Alarms screamed louder, soldiers opened fire again, and Daniel braced himself against her palm. Every bullet, every dart, every scream bounced off the truth burning in his chest. He was no longer just a prisoner, and she was no longer just an experiment. Together, they were breaking out. Concrete split like thunder as her claws tore into the wall. Dust rained down, choking the chamber, swallowing the shouts of soldiers. The air filled with the sharp tang of gunpowder and powdered stone. Daniel clung to her hand as she ripped a gaping wound in the prison's underground. Floodlights exploded behind them, shadows swallowing the chaos. He felt every tremor of her body, the strain in her muscles, the heat of her blood under her skin. Bullets ricocheted, darts hissed, but she pressed forward, shielding him with her body, refusing to slow. Then daylight. A blinding shaft of moonlight poured through the breach, cutting across her blue skin. Fresh air rushed in, cool and sharp with desert wind. For the first time in years, Daniel breathed free air. And for the first time since she'd been dragged here, so did she. The giantess roared, the sound ripping into the night sky. It wasn't rage this time, it was victory. But victory came at a cost. She staggered. Daniel's stomach dropped as he felt the tremor in her hand. Black liquid, thicker than blood, seeped from her shoulder where tranquilizer darts clustered like thorns. Her breath rattled, heavier, slower. No, no, no. Don't you quit on me, Daniel muttered, gripping her claw. His voice broke. You got us out. Don't stop now. Her silver eyes flicked down to him. Even through the haze of poison, they burned with stubborn fire. She curled her fingers tighter, as if to say I won't. He believed her. The desert stretched out before them, an ocean of black sand and silver moonlight. The prison loomed behind, alarms wailing like sirens in the dark. Spotlights flared from the towers above. Sirens blared louder. And then came the growl of engines. Military trucks roared across the sand, their headlights slashing through the night. She kept moving, carrying Daniel in her hand like he was the only thing anchoring her to the earth. Each step shook the ground, her massive frame silhouetted against the moon. Daniel twisted around, scanning the horizon. They'd never outrun vehicles. Not across open desert. Left, he shouted, pointing toward a jagged ridge of red rock in the distance. The cliffs. Her gaze followed his arm. Without hesitation, she veered toward the rocks, sand exploding under her strides. Bullets chased them, streaking the air, but she didn't slow. For the first time, Daniel realized what trust felt like. She didn't question. She didn't hesitate. She listened. They were running together. By the time they reached the cliffs, her breaths came ragged. Daniel could hear the labored rasp deep in her chest. He gritted his teeth, fear slicing through him. She couldn't keep this pace. Not with tranquilizer burning her veins. He pressed against her claw, desperate. Put me down. You can move faster without me. Her head snapped toward him, silver eyes blazing. She shook her head, strands of blue hair whipping. Mine, she growled. He laughed bitterly, even as his chest ached. You don't understand. If you keep carrying me, they'll... Her hand tightened, not enough to hurt, but enough to silence him. Her eyes narrowed with something he couldn't mistake. She wasn't letting him go. They reached the base of the cliffs, where boulders jutted like broken teeth. She ducked into a shallow canyon, squeezing her massive frame between stone walls. Moonlight fractured across her skin, painting her in sharp streaks of blue and silver. Here, the gunfire dulled. Engines struggled on the rocks. The canyon walls muffled the searchlights. For a moment, silence. Daniel exhaled hard, his chest burning. She lowered him onto a ledge, her claws trembling as they released him. He scrambled forward, putting a hand against her wrist. Her skin was hot, feverish. The black liquid dripped steadily now. You're poisoned, he whispered. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Her eyes fluttered. Panic clawed at his gut. He pressed both hands against her skin, useless but desperate. Stay with me. Please. You didn't come this far just to... His voice cracked. He swallowed hard. Just to leave me. Her gaze locked onto his. Weak but steady. And then she did something that shattered him. She leaned in, massive face lowering until her forehead brushed against the cliff just above him. Close enough that her hair spilled around him like a curtain. Close enough that he felt the faint, rhythmic pulse of her breath against his skin. An intimacy no cage could crush. Daniel's hands shook as he touched her wrist again. You saved me. Now I'm going to save you. I don't care if I have to drag you through this desert myself. For the first time, her lips curved. Not a snarl, not a grimace. Something softer, almost a smile. The sound she made was faint, broken, but the word was clear. Donald. His chest tightened. His throat closed. He blinked hard, refusing to let tears fall. I'm here, he whispered. Always. Behind them, the rumble of engines returned. The searchlights swept over the canyon mouth. Voices shouted orders. Boots crunched on gravel. The reprieve was over. But Daniel didn't feel the same fear anymore. Because in her eyes, he saw it. They weren't just running. They weren't just surviving. They were fighting together. And that changed everything. The canyon walls shook with the weight of engines and boots. Spotlights knifed through the night, slicing the darkness apart until there was nowhere left to hide. Daniel crouched against the rock, his chest heaving, his fists clenched so hard his knuckles bled. Beside him, the alien giantess braced herself against the cliffs, one hand pressed into the wound in her shoulder. Her glowing blood smeared against stone, dripping in luminous streaks down the canyon wall. She was weakening. The soldiers knew it. Target contained. A voice barked through a megaphone. Surrender the specimen, or we'll open fire. The word specimen echoed like a curse. Daniel stood. His body shook, but his voice didn't. She's not yours. A murmur ran through the soldiers. Then the commander laughed. Flat, metallic. Son, she's not yours either. Daniel glanced at her. She loomed behind him, eyes dimming but still locked on him with stubborn, burning intensity. She shook her head once, as if to warn him. Don't give yourself up. But Daniel wasn't planning to surrender. He was planning to fight. The first shot cracked the air. Daniel dropped as bullets sprayed the canyon wall. Sparks and rock shards exploded around him. The alien roared, the sound vibrating through his bones, shaking loose gravel from the cliffs above. She surged forward, shielding him with her massive body. Bullets tore in her back, black blood misting into the night. Daniel screamed, "Stop! You'll kill her." But the soldiers kept firing. Her massive clawed hand slammed down, crushing a jeep like paper. The explosion lit the canyon red, fire swallowing men in its wake. The shock wave sent Daniel sprawling, ears ringing, chest burning from the blast wave. When he looked up, she was a silhouette against the fire, hair wild, skin glowing blue against the inferno. For a second, she wasn't just a prisoner. She was a god of war. But gods bleed. Daniel saw it when her knees buckled. He scrambled to her side as she collapsed against the rock, breath ragged, blood pouring faster now. Her silver eyes flickered down to him. She lifted one trembling finger, so huge compared to his body, and brushed it across his chest, smearing him with glowing streaks. It wasn't random. It was a mark. Her mark. Daniel's throat locked. He pressed his forehead against her claw. No, don't you do this to me. Don't you dare. Her lips moved. Weak, halting. Run. But Daniel didn't run. He stood. The soldiers regrouped, tightening formation, weapons raised. The commander sneered, signaling his men forward. Step away from the asset, Carter. This is your last warning. Daniel's chest heaved, his hands curling into fists. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't trained. But he was done being powerless. He grabbed a fallen rifle from the ground. The weight of it shocked him, but his grip didn't falter. He raised it, hands shaking, and aimed straight at the commander. She's not an asset, he growled. She's herself. The soldiers froze. For one insane heartbeat, no one moved. Then all hell broke loose. Gunfire roared. Grenades detonated. Smoke swallowed the canyon. Daniel fired blindly, rage driving him through the haze. His shoulder jerked with recoil, ears ringing with each shot. He didn't hit much, but it didn't matter. The act itself was defiance. The alien rose again, using the last of her strength. She smashed into the canyon wall, sending boulders crashing down, crushing vehicles and scattering men. The ground shook, cracks spiderwebbing beneath Daniel's feet. The canyon itself became a weapon. Then came a price. Daniel saw the rocket launcher a split second too late. The soldier fired. The missile streaked straight toward him, unstoppable. He froze. His body wouldn't move fast enough. But hers did. With one last surge of strength, the giantess swept her hand in front of him. The explosion tore in her palm, shredding blue flesh, blasting her backward. She roared, a sound so raw and broken that Daniel's soul split in half. She collapsed. The canyon fell silent. Daniel stumbled to her side, choking on smoke, his heart shattering at the sight. Her chest rose and fell shallowly, blood pooling around her, glowing against the stone. Her hand, ruined, charred, still curled protectively around him. He pressed against her, tears cutting tracks through the soot on his face. No, please, don't do this. Don't leave me. You can't leave me. Her silver eyes flickered open, dim now, fading. But she managed a word. Mine. Daniel broke. He clutched her massive finger, sobbing into her skin. He didn't care that soldiers surrounded them. He didn't care that guns aimed at his back. All he cared about was her. A sudden silence fell. Daniel looked up through tears. The soldiers had stopped. The commander stood frozen, staring at the sight before them. The specimen shattered, broken, but shielding one fragile human with her entire body. For the first time, Daniel saw doubt in their eyes. Not fear of her power, but awe of her devotion. Because even dying, she chose to protect him. The moment shattered when the commander barked, "Finish it." Engines roared again. Boots crunched forward. Daniel stood over her body, arms spread, shaking but unyielding. His voice cut through the chaos. "You'll have to kill me first." The canyon smoldered like a wound, torn open in the earth. Flames hissed against rock, smoke rising in black ribbons into the night sky. The acrid stench of fuel and blood clung to every breath. Daniel stood over her body, arms wide, as if his fragile frame could shield her from the storm of rifles pointed at them both. His knees trembled. His chest ached with every ragged inhale. But he didn't move. Behind him, the giantess lay half-conscious. Her blue skin flickered faintly in the glow of burning vehicles, her blood staining the dirt in luminous streaks. The wound in her palm smoked where the rocket had torn through flesh. Each breath she took was shallow, rattling, but alive. Alive. That was enough. The soldiers advanced cautiously. Their boots crunched over gravel and shattered glass. They had her down, but they weren't blind to the carnage she had unleashed. The commander raised a fist. The men froze. His helmet visor gleamed orange in the firelight as he studied Daniel. Small, defiant, standing over a broken colossus like he believed he could stop an army. "You're not walking out of here, Carter," the commander said coldly. "Step away, and we'll consider letting you live." Daniel's throat burned as he shouted back. "You had your chance. She's not yours." The words didn't come from courage. They came from somewhere deeper, something raw, primal, something he hadn't known he had until she marked him with her blood. The standoff dragged. Smoke curled upward, the only sound the crackle of flames and the distant groan of twisted metal. Then headlights flared across the canyon rim. Dozens more vehicles. Reinforcements. Daniel's stomach dropped. This wasn't just cleanup. This was an execution. He turned back to her. Her silver eyes opened slightly, unfocused, searching. She rasped his name again, broken, faint. He knelt, pressing his forehead against her fingers. "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." Her lips curved just barely, almost a smile. Then her eyes slid closed again. Panic clawed at him. He shook her finger, desperate. "Stay with me. Please." She stirred weakly. Her chest rose. Relief washed over him, but it was temporary. She wouldn't last if they kept fighting here. He needed to move her. He had no idea how. The rumble of boots pulled him back. The commander's voice cut through the night. "Last warning. Step aside." Daniel rose, turned to face them again. His whole body shook, his hands empty. But his eyes didn't waver. "She saved me. She bled for me. If you want her, you'll have to put me in the ground first." Something shifted. The soldiers hesitated, not because they feared him, but because they recognized him. The way he stood, the way he refused to break. The commander snarled, "He's nothing. Take him." But no one moved. One soldier muttered under his breath, "Sir, she protected him." Another, "She had every chance to kill him. Didn't." The commander's hand twitched on his sidearm. Orders are orders. But before he could finish, the canyon trembled again. She was rising. The giantess, broken and bloodied, forced herself upright. The effort tore a guttural roar from her chest. Her massive frame shook, her hair hung wild, and her silver eyes burned even through the haze of pain. She staggered forward, one hand braced on the canyon wall. Her other, ruined hand curled protectively around Daniel, pulling him close against her chest. The soldiers faltered. The commander swore. Even wounded, she towered over them like a storm-given flesh. Daniel pressed a hand against her skin, feeling the heat of her blood searing his palm. He looked up at her face, at the fire burning in her eyes. "You don't have to fight anymore," he whispered. But she did fight, just not with violence. She stepped back into the shadows of the canyon, shielding Daniel with her body as she retreated. Each movement was slow, deliberate, defiant. She wasn't running. She was leaving. Every soldier there could have opened fire. None did, because for the first time, they weren't looking at a monster. They were looking at devotion. Minutes stretched like hours. Step by step, she carried Daniel into the darkness beyond the flames, until the glow of headlights faded behind them. The canyon swallowed them whole. Finally, when the sound of engines dwindled, she collapsed. Daniel scrambled from her arms, catching her head as it lowered gently to the dirt. He pressed his hands against her wounds, frantic, useless. Her breathing was shallow, but she was alive. And for the first time since this nightmare began, the silence around them wasn't filled with gunfire. It was just them. Daniel slumped against her, exhaustion crashing over him. He whispered into the night, his voice breaking, "They'll never stop coming. But I don't care. I'm not letting them take you. Ever." Her silver eyes cracked open again, faint glow shimmering. She studied him for a long moment, as if etching him into her memory. And then, with a voice barely louder than the wind, she repeated the only word that mattered. "Mine." The desert was silent. Not the silence of peace, but of aftermath. The kind that follows when every scream, every shot, every explosion has burned itself out. The only sound left was the rasp of her breath, the whisper of wind sliding across stone, and Daniel's heartbeat pounding in his ears. He sat beside her massive frame, one hand resting against the curve of her wrist. Her skin was still hot, still trembling faintly from the venom of the tranquilizers and the shock of wounds. Every so often her chest rose, then fell, in slow, deliberate rhythm. Alive. Always the word echoing in his head. She was alive, and so was he. Daniel tilted his head back against the canyon wall. The stars stretched endless above him, sharp and cold, a billion pinpricks of light. For years he had stared at them through steel bars, wishing for escape, for freedom. Now here he was free, and yet he knew the truth. Freedom wasn't what he had found tonight. It was her. The thought made him laugh, soft and bitter. He should have been terrified, should have been praying for rescue, or plotting how to disappear off the grid, or begging her to leave him behind before the military leveled the canyon. But instead, all he could think was, don't let go. Her fingers twitched. Daniel blinked and looked down. Even half unconscious, she was reaching, slowly, clumsily, toward him. Her claws scraped softly against the stone until they found him, curling just enough to brush his leg. He placed his hand against her knuckles, and for the first time, he didn't feel like a prisoner shielding himself from a monster. He felt like a man holding hands with someone who refused to let him be alone. His mind drifted back to the prison. The guards, the scientists, the endless walls. They had always told him what she was. A weapon. A monster. A mistake. But none of them had ever seen what he had. They hadn't seen her stand in front of gunfire to shield him. They hadn't heard his name fall from her lips, cracked but real. They hadn't watched her drag herself to her feet, broken and bleeding, just to keep him safe. And they never would, because they hadn't earned her. Daniel swallowed hard, his throat tight. Why me? He whispered. The canyon didn't answer. Neither did the stars. Only the faint stir of her breath, slow and steady, filling the silence. Maybe it didn't matter. Maybe the universe didn't hand out reasons for everything. But one truth kept circling in his chest like a storm he couldn't shake. She had chosen him. And in the end, he had chosen her, too. He thought of the men in the canyon, their rifles raised, their orders clear. None of them had fired. Not because they feared her strength, though they should have, but because they had seen something no gun could destroy. They had seen devotion, and devotion had a power of its own. Daniel exhaled shakily. He leaned his head against her hand, closing his eyes. I don't care what they say you are. You're not a monster. You're mine too. The night deepened. Time blurred. At some point, exhaustion claimed him. His body slumped against her fingers, and he let sleep take him. When he woke, dawn was bleeding into the desert sky. The light revealed the truth. Her wounds were real, deep and brutal, but her body was built for survival. Already, the black fluid had slowed, sealing itself over. Her chest rose stronger now, her breath less ragged. Her eyes opened, silver against the morning haze. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. No chains, no walls, no soldiers between them. Only a boy and a giantess, broken and alive in a canyon the world had already forgotten. Daniel finally smiled, small and tired. Guess we made it. Her lips parted, and though her voice was still a rasp, it carried weight that made his chest tighten. Together, the words sank into him, anchoring him deeper than any prison ever had. Together. For the first time in his life, Daniel realized he wasn't running from something. He wasn't hiding, or surviving, or waiting for the next cage to close. He was moving toward something. Toward her. The desert had a way of erasing things. Tracks vanished overnight. Smoke dispersed into pale skies. Even the blood, once bright and luminous against the rocks, faded into faint stains that the wind carried away. But not everything could be erased. Daniel knew that when he watched her walk again, slow, uneven, but alive. Days had passed since the canyon burned. They had hidden in ravines, followed dry riverbeds, moved when the stars gave them cover. Every step felt like a stolen breath, but she adapted. Her body, built to survive a world far harsher than Earth, healed faster than any wound had a right to. The scars would remain, of course. Thin cracks of darker blue traced across her skin where the rockets had struck, reminders of what she had endured. She didn't try to hide them. When her silver eyes met his, he understood. Scars weren't weakness. They were proof. And he carried his own, invisible but no less permanent. On the seventh night, they reached the edge of the desert. Ahead stretched the world he had once known, Highways, cities, glowing signs promising food and warmth. Civilization. Her massive frame crouched low in the shadows of a canyon ridge, scanning the horizon with wary eyes. Daniel stood at her side, feeling the enormity of the choice pressing on them. Out there was everything: safety, danger, possibility. The military wouldn't stop hunting. The world wouldn't understand. And yet, he felt no fear. Not anymore. He looked up at her, at the way the starlight caught in her tangled blue hair, at the quiet strength in the set of her jaw. "We can't go back," he said softly. "But maybe we don't need to." Her gaze dropped to him. Her voice was low, almost human now, shaped by the countless times she had spoken his name. "Home," she whispered. He smiled. "Yeah, we'll make one. Together." They didn't return to the cities. Not yet. Instead, they built their own path. By day, they moved through abandoned stretches of wilderness, places humanity had forgotten. By night, they spoke, slowly, haltingly, piecing together fragments of language. She learned from him, syllable by syllable, while he learned from her expressions, her silences, the ways her silver eyes softened whenever he was near. Sometimes she laughed, a sound raw and strange, shaking the ground, but genuine. It made him laugh too, until the desert echoed with something no weapon could ever erase. And when exhaustion took them, he would rest against her hand, her body curled protectively around him. In those moments, Daniel didn't feel small. He felt infinite. Weeks blurred into something else. Not survival, not escape, life. He hunted rabbits with makeshift snares. She learned to gather water from plants he never would have noticed. Together, they carved out an existence that was theirs alone. And somewhere in the silence between their words, in the spaces where fear once lived, something deeper grew. Not chains, not necessity, choice. One evening, under a sky lit by the fractured glow of the moon, she reached for him. Not with desperation, not with possession, but with something gentler. Her fingertip traced his shoulder, lingering. Daniel pressed his palm to her skin. He didn't need to speak. Neither did she. The bond between them had outgrown the prison, the battlefield, even the scars. It wasn't about survival anymore. It was about belonging. Months later, rumors began to spread. Truckers whispered about shadows moving across the desert hills. Too large to be human, too graceful to be machine. Soldiers posted to remote bases spoke of silver eyes watching from ridgelines. But no one could prove it. No one could catch them. The desert erased almost everything. But not them. Daniel didn't know what the future held. Maybe one day the world would see her. Maybe they would run forever. Maybe tomorrow would bring another battle. But as he stood at her side on a cliff edge, the wind in his hair and her hand resting near his, he realized none of that mattered. The world had tried to break them. Instead, it had given them to each other. He turned to her, voice steady. "Sure. As long as I'm breathing, I'm with you." Her silver eyes glowed faintly, reflecting the stars. "Mine," she said again, but softer this time. Not a claim, not a command, a promise. And so their story didn't end in chains or fire, but in the quiet defiance of two lives bound together. Human and alien, fragile and immense, scarred and unbroken. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Thank you for following this story. If you've ever rooted for an impossible love, leave a comment and share your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe, because there are many more stories like this waiting for you.